We were disappointed that my son John couldn't come home from Korea for the street dedication, nor my son Patrick in South Carolina, but he, in Korea, found an article in the Army Times talking about the 70th Division Association reunion to be held later that fall in Las Vegas, Nevada. And John suggested by letter, of course we didn't have computers back in 1990, that I go do it and he would meet me there because he was going to be stationed in San Francisco. Good idea. So we planned it. I went and we met and stayed at the hotel where the reunion was. And to anyone seeing this program who has more interest in learning about the 70th Division, they have a marvelous website with videos and all kinds of comprehensive information about the association, what the division did during the war, some of the veterans, the awards, the casualties, and so on. Just go Google 70th Division Association and you'll get a wealth of information. So my son John and I went to some of the exhibits, attended some of the sessions, and met some of the vets that were there. It was very interesting and an honor meeting some of these men who 45 years before were my father's comrade in arms in World War II. Back in 1990, I was one of the few associate members there who was a child of one of the veterans, because most of these guys would have been 18 to 21, 2 or 3 at that time, and my father was 33, and probably one of the few troopers that had a 10-year-old son when the war ended. And one of the mornings at the meeting, they had a roll call in one of the big ballrooms with 900, 1,000, maybe 1,100 guys in it. I was sitting way towards the back, just taking in this amazing, solemn experience. They started up from the front, calling off their name, their outfit, and where they now live. Johnson, Headquarters Company, Cleveland, Ohio. Sorensen, Elk Company, 276, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. And I just sat there impressed as each one called off his name, where he was stationed, and where he now lived. When it came to my turn in the back, I said, "My name's Jack Duffy, associate member. My father was Lieutenant John Duffy, M Company, 274th. And the whole ballroom broke out in applause, and I couldn't figure out, what's this all about? A few minutes later, this guy comes up, taps me on the back, and says, "Come here, I want you to meet someone back here." He takes me in the back and says, "Here, this is Jack Pastras. He was your dad's platoon sergeant." We both look at each other in amazement, and he says, "You're Jack Duffy's kid. Oh my God, I can't believe it. I was his platoon sergeant." He and I even drank a little scotch together in some of the quieter moments, and we both start bawling, and he says, "I was the guy who carried his body out of there." We really start bawling, and my son John, this big, scrapping, crew-cut Army paratrooper, is looking on in amazement also. And then Jack looks at my son John and says, "And this is Jack Duffy's grandson?" Oh my gosh. Well, I said this story had some miraculous happenings that brought all about, and this probably was the culmination of it all. Here I am, 45 years after my dad was killed, meeting the man who was with him in the last battles and was with him the day he died. I'm sure it was the good Lord that pointed John to that notice about the 70th Division Association that he read in the Army Times and got us to go to it. I had brought along with me in a Kodak carousel rack all the 2x2 slides I had taken of the beginning of this story, of being at the cemetery, meeting Jean-Pierre and his wife Andre, meeting the brother, the Michel, and the dedication of the street in Dinozay. And they were having breakout sessions that afternoon, and since the 274th Regiment was meeting in one of the rooms, I asked them if they'd like to hear this. They said they would. We got a projector, and I showed the slide and talked a little bit about the first part of this program. And there were maybe 50 guys from the 274th Regiment there, and they were really impressed to learn the story about one of their comrades in arms, the burial at the cemetery in Dinozay, and the dedication of the street. And several of them said, "Holy smoke, I wish I'd have known. I'd have gone." So who knows, after seeing this DVD presentation, maybe some of the members of the 70th Division may still want to take a trip to Epinal and go to the cemetery in Dinozay and meet some of the Michel Henry's family. It would be an experience they would relish for the rest of their lives. Jean and Andre visited Helen and me and our family once or twice after that, and went with his friend Long Jack from Beloit, Wisconsin, to the 45th Division reunion. But then he got ill. I think he had some heart failure and knew he was in trouble. Had us send back his, by then, 3.5 or $3,700 back to France with Long Jack so he could put a roof on the house for his wife, because he knew his end was coming. It was sad for us, but we really had many fond memories of John and Andre. On one of those trips, and this is one of the things I'll always remember, he said, "I would like to go visit my platoon leader and a good friend we have." I thought, sure, let's get in the car and go. He says, "Yes, the platoon leader lives in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and the other friend is in Walla Walla, Washington." And I said, "Right, John, let me tell you this. The distance that we would have to travel from here to Myrtle Beach and then to Walla Walla, Washington, it is the same distance as would be from your home in Chameau, France to Baghdad, Iraq. To Europeans, the distances are so small between countries, and he had no conception of the distance it would be to travel across the United States, so of course we didn't go. My Aunt Catherine gave the sign to my cousin Albert to hang in his butcher shop so it would be in a place where people could see it. When he closed the shop, he took the sign and put it in his garage, and he was talking to my other cousin Eddie, and he said, "Here, why don't you give this to cousin John," that's me, "and let him have the sign, because after all it was his dad." Well, Ed and I got talking, thinking, I don't really have a place to put it either. Why not your little brother Bill, the youngest of the Duffy cousins, who has a eating and drinking establishment in San Francisco, and they might be able to put it in a place where it might get some exposure. We thought a good idea, so we decided to do so. So on a trip out to California, when we were visiting our two California kids, our oldest son John and number 2 child daughter Mary Bridget, we made a trek to the old Ship Saloon in the financial district of San Francisco and had a hand over the sign ceremony to cousin Bill. And that's how the sign ended up in the financial district in San Francisco. And there's Bill's Saloon, the old Ship Saloon, which is the shrine which is now the final resting place of the Rue de Frères Duffy sign. And that, of course, occasioned a brief but joyful Duffy party/celebration. And we knew Bill's wife, Mary Ryan Duffy, would have an artistic flair and knew some things about making a presentable collage, which she did, put together a rather tasteful and attractive display. They've also added pictures of Bill's dad, the B-24 pilot, and our Aunt Marge, his dad, as my dad and mother, and pictures of my dad and brother, as well as the flag that was used to cover the street sign in Dinozé at the unveiling back in 1990. And there hangs the sign, the Rue de Frères Duffy sign, the sign that this program's all about, in its final resting place. Late in 2008, I wanted to get some more information for this DVD program, and I went to the internet and got the 70th Division Association website. What an amazing storehouse of information I found. And my son John and I, a retired Army lieutenant colonel, we both decided to join the association as associate members. What a blessing that turned out to be. We were flooded with all kinds of information, a very detailed and comprehensive welcoming letter from the secretary of the association, Diane Kessler, who was an Army nurse and her husband was an Army oral surgeon, and who provided us with much information about the 70th Division, various veterans living or dead, and location and history of the whole Duffy family. In addition, I received interesting emails from some of the members of the association, which really broadened our depth of understanding about what happened during World War II. And as a bonus, and I don't remember what part of the website I found this on, but probably the casualty list, and I found this very attractive and tasteful, meaningful certificate suitable for framing in honor of my father, and I was so impressed with this. I'm going to have to go back to the website and check this out. I'm sure this has been done for many of the veterans and many of those that were killed in action. And now that I think about it, I may go ahead and get another copy and then go ahead and frame it. It looks so attractive. Then early this year, my son John and I each received the same email from a 70th Division Associate member, Bill Ellis in Texas, a most comprehensive email with a treasury of information about the 70th Division, some of the personnel, and with what he and his children are doing. He mentioned briefly that as a history project, some of his kids were looking into some of the things that went on around World War II, and they went to a cemetery where they found a grave of the 70th Division soldier. It had not been well attended, and they took on this gravesite as a project to go ahead and improve it and bring it up to date and make it look attractive. And they sent us information about that gravesite. The grave they discovered was of one Sergeant Schnell, who was in the 70th Division and who was killed on the 7th of January 1945, the same day my father was killed. They really did a marvelous job fixing up his gravesite, and I'm very anxious to visit it when we go down Texas way. Mr. Ellis went to the snow ridges and pillboxes and realized and mentioned to us that obviously that we must have known about it because it was in the same battle that my father was killed. In fact, Schnell was in my father's platoon. And then a light went off in my brain. I remember reading that back in 1982 when we first got a copy of the book from our friend in Zurich, Switzerland. And then when I reread it just a few days ago, I thought, holy smoke, this is amazing. Schnell and my father could have been killed in the same moment, probably by the same SS trooper with his 88. I'm so grateful to Ellis to pointing this out to me so I could relearn my history. Getting this contact and all this information from Bill Ellis in Texas was another one of those improbable, near miraculous events in this whole program. So I went back to page 99 in my book, Snow Ridges and Pillboxes, and read that part again, where it says, after Duffy was hit, Sergeant Schnell saw that Mastrangelo needed help bad, so he came over to give him a hand. Continues Sergeant Downing. He was trying to get the wounded out of the line of fire when the Krauts got him too. He was hit in the throat and died right away. He fell among the guys he was trying to save. What's so amazing is here I am 64 years after the event, rereading this and having a new explosion of awareness about the whole subject, which was so meaningful in the lives of our family. This action took place on January 7th in Rothbach in eastern France, or Alsace-Lorraine, and this was going on about the same time the Battle of the Bulge, just a few miles to the north, was ending. And as I remember the history, there was a big German push just a little south of there through the area where the 70th Division and the 45th Division were stationed. And again, the place where my father was killed was probably not 50 miles from where his mother was born, the town of near Neunkirchen, or Schiffweiler, I think was the name of the town. I remember my grandmother telling me that in this area in the 19th century they used to have two flags because they never knew whether they were going to belong to the German or the French side. And I think the border between the two countries in that area has changed from time to time, from war to war. The Saarland and the Ruhr Valley, always industrial areas of the country, were often looked at as the prize for winning whatever war they were in. And even though it is France, the people in these towns in this area, unlike the rest of France, are white wine drinkers more like the Germans than the red wine drinkers throughout the rest of France. Bill Ellis mentioned in his email that he logically figured that my father hadn't known about Eddie's death nor what had gone on in the situation that brought it all about with the 45th Division and their activities a little further south in France. But as I mentioned earlier, and I told him in an email, that my father had come home on emergency leave before he shipped out for Europe. And I shared with him the copy of that letter, my last letter my dad had written after meeting with Eddie's company commander when the 45th Division was online with the 70th Division, end of December, early January 1945. And my dad's talking with the CO of Eddie's company about the situation, but they were interrupted by a German attack, and too many activities were going on to finish the discussion. And so I sent Ellis a copy of that letter, but I was sure amazed at the awareness that Mr. Ellis has in digging out all the facts and reviewing the history of the 70th Division and their activities. Among the very nice welcoming emails my son John and I received, one was from a Colonel Carl Landstrom, who happened to be the battalion commander of my dad's outfit. And in a reply to him, I mentioned that not too many of the 70th Division veterans of that war would have had a 10-year-old at the end of the war, because my father, I figured, must have been one of the older guys in the outfit. Most of the troopers at that time were, 19, 20, 22 would be old. And he sent a very interesting reply saying, oh, no, indeed, that he and my father weren't the oldest. There were several of the company commander captains who were in that same age group. Landstrom talked about how He felt physical fitness was so important for his troops and his officers, and he obviously must practice what he preaches, because in this month, February 2009, he's going to celebrate his 100th birthday. My father's 100th birthday would have been February 22nd, 2009. As an interesting addendum, Abraham Lincoln's birthday would have been his 200th birthday this February. Now, I said earlier that one of the target audiences for this DVD program is all the descendants of Grandma Duffy and the children of my cousins, my brother, and myself, and all their children for generations to come. Here again is the picture of the 10 of us at the funeral of my Uncle Don, the husband of my Aunt Marge, who's in the front of us. Don was the youngest of the Duffy brothers. I think his funeral was in 2003, and that left our Aunt Marge as the last member of that greatest generation still living. Well, just about 3 months ago, in November 2008, we lost Aunt Marge, and so that's the last of the greatest generation of the Duffy family, the World War II group, who have now passed on, leaving me as the oldest living member of the Duffy family. And here's a picture of Don and Marge Duffy, probably taken in 1944, after their marriage and before his going over to Italy to join the 15th Air Force to do his job during World War II. This picture also is in the shrine of the Old Ship Saloon in San Francisco, hanging with the other pictures of the Duffy family in World War II. Just last August 2008, a couple of months before Aunt Marge died, her kids and her grandkids treated her to what must have been the experience of a lifetime. And of course, we didn't know at the time that she was really going to get seriously ill in a couple of months and leave us, but there was an air show in their town on the west side of Chicago. It features a B-17 and a B-24, and they arranged for her to have a ride in a B-24, the aircraft that her young husband spent a lot of time in 1944 and 45, the first 2 years of their marriage. Amazing again, here she is 63 years later, finally getting a ride in the vehicle that her husband used to help win World War II. We were with her at her 85th birthday party in Chicago with all of her relatives and grandkids and great-grandkids, and she told us just how thrilled she was at this experience, and as I look at the pictures, I have to believe it is indeed true. I'm so glad they did that for her, especially now that, as we found out later, that she was going to die 3 months later. I think there is some significance about this generation business, and I do hope and trust that some of the later generations of the Duffy family will get a chance to see this program and have some insight as to what their ancestors did in World War II. Fortunately, we were able to capture a picture of the 5 generations when Aunt Marge was still alive. This picture taken in 2007, shortly after my first great-grandson, Liam James, was born. Here's the 5 generations: Aunt Marge, myself, my son Matt Duffy, his son Matthew John Duffy, and Matthew's firstborn, Liam James Duffy. And very recently I've detected some interest on the part of succeeding generations. I've been sharing the emails of the 70th Division information I've been receiving with all of my children, all of whom have been very intrigued by the process, and they knew I was doing this DVD program. My son Matt got so interested that he contacted the association and purchased a copy of the history of the 274th Regiment, Snow Ridges and Pillboxes. I'm dictating this on Sunday, the 8th day of February 2009. Last Thursday night, February 5th, my son Matt called me and told me that his daughter, Kira, my 9-year-old granddaughter, got interested in this, and she took the book to read to her 3rd grade class the part about the great-grandfather whom she had never known and the story of his death during World War II. And there's Kira with our youngest granddaughter, Eiley Kellen Duffy. And any of you Duffys or Duffy descendants years from now, or anyone else seeing this program and who should be interested, if you ever plan a trip to France and get to the town of Dinozé, if you do, doubtless you will end up on Rue de Frères Duffy, the road that will ultimately lead you to the United States Military Cemetery. And if you can time your visit so you get there in May, on Memorial Day in May, you will see the two flags, the French and the American flag, flying from almost every house in the village. And if you do get to Dinozay and you're on the Rue de Frères Duffy and you get to the cemetery, I want you to remember the man whose memory we memorialize, our dear friend Jean-Baptiste Pierre, whom the good Lord directed us to meet and got this whole program started. And then you should get to meet his brother Michel Pierre Henry, who lives at 273 Rue de Frères Duffy. Knock on his door, tell him who you are, and you will be amazed at how welcome you will be and how well you'll be received. And you better plan on more than a couple of hours in that village. And Michel is the one who instigated the change of the name of the street in the village of Dinozay, because he wanted the children of that town to know there was a very good reason that 5,255 American bodies are buried at the end of their street. And as the French newspaper so poetically puts their prose, that small caption reads something like, "The American Cemetery of Dinozay, where there are 5,255 crosses and white stars of David, remember a conflict without precedents that the United States did not spare their efforts 45 years ago. And now we remember again and name the road that the children's school is on, and the common area of the town will soon be rebaptized in honor of these two brothers, American soldiers, dead on the field of honor." And here sit Michel and Francois around the fireplace at their home in Dinozay, France at Christmas time 2007. And there's that same cozy table at Christmas time, the one at which we were treated so warmly and wined and dined so sumptuously when we were there probably 20 years ago with our two sons, John and Tom. And that's when we first met Michel, and I'm not so sure he was thinking about this dedication of the street project then, but it developed shortly thereafter. And of course, after the street name was changed to Rue de Frères Duffy in 1990, he was able to move the family and the whole house without having to physically move anything. And they ended up on Rue de Frères Duffy 273. And here's pretty much the whole families of Jean-Baptiste Pierre and Michel Pierre Henry, that marvelous family in France that we feel so kindred to, that we owe so much to, and we Duffy should hold in our memories and honor forever. It's like God chose this whole family to be life enrichers for the Duffy family. And wow, have they ever enriched our family. We pray God to bless them and all their descendants forever. And if you're there in that United States Cemetery in Dinozay, as you walk among the crosses and the stars of David, just remember the men of the 70th Division and the 45th Division who fought in this area, who died there and are buried there, and the reason that they did it and what they accomplished by doing this. We completed the original part of this program about 3 or 4 weeks ago, and since then this is a story that keeps on writing itself, actually. The diploma-like structure that you see now is the one that was made by this Bill Ellis. About 2 weeks ago, Bill Ellis sent me this email saying that he and the girls were going to the cemetery to doctor up the place a little bit, to replace the worn and tattered flag, as he says here, because in the hot, dry, windy part of South Texas that it tears a flag up, and he wanted to replace this flag to honor my father on his 100th birthday. And as he mentioned in the email, he took his special marking pencil or carver and he put this annotation on the flag that he was going to send to us. And lo and behold, about a week ago, in the mail comes this tube dropped off by our postman. And I opened the tube, and as promised, this is the flag that was sent to us by Bill Ellis and his daughters. And I'm going to read what he had written on the flag. This flag flew over the grave of Sergeant T.M. Schnell, Company M, 274th Infantry Division, killed in action January 7, 1945, Memorial Day 2008 to February 22nd, 2009. That's how long this flag flew over that grave. And that's the 100th birthday of First Lieutenant John Duffy, who was Sergeant Schnell's platoon leader, Company M, 274th Division, 74th Regiment of the 70th Infantry Division, killed in action January 7, 1945.